Hello, I'm Emilee Mooney Scott, Environmental Partner at Robinson & Cole. Thank you for watching the Release Report, a video series that highlights key features of Connecticut's new Release-Based Cleanup Regulations, or RBCRs, slated to go into effect on March 1st, 2026. This is Episode 6. Today we will discuss characterization, which is the process required to understand and document the nature and extent of a release. Additional details are available in a companion post on the Robinson & Cole Environmental Law Plus blog. At a very basic level, in order to determine what, if anything, needs to be done about a release, one needs to understand what material has been released and where in the environment that material has come to be located. This process is called characterization. Characterization is a familiar concept, and it has long been part of the remediation process under the Transfer Act and other programs. Under the Transfer Act, the characterization process began with a site-wide investigation of areas of concern. Under the RBCRs, however, characterization is a release-by-release process with no requirement to take a site-wide approach. The new RBCRs set forth requirements for the characterization, remediation, and closure of both old and new releases. The first few episodes in this series are related to the discovery and reporting of old or existing releases. The next few episodes in the series are related to reporting and response to new releases. This episode and the episodes that follow relate to both new and existing releases. As we begin, let's familiarize ourselves with some key terminology. Characterization is defined by the RBCRs as determining the nature and extent of a release in accordance with prevailing standards and guidelines. The prevailing standards and guidelines referenced in this definition mean a guidance document called the Release Characterization Guidance, or other set of standards developed or otherwise approved in writing by DEEP, the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Characterization requires the development of what is called a conceptual site model, which is defined by the RBCRs as a three-dimensional representation of environmental conditions at a release area that is developed through a multi-phased investigative approach validated by facts and observations. Development of a conceptual site model is a technical and fact-specific endeavor that requires the expertise of a licensed environmental professional, or LEP. This discussion is meant to be an overview, and any actual characterization effort will need to be developed by an LEP familiar with the site and the release. Development of a conceptual site model includes evaluation of information such as historical information, like which activities occurred at a site, physical setting, like site topography and geology, chemical properties of the substances discovered, receptor pathways and potential receptors, like water supply wells and occupied buildings, and sampling results. Characterization is inherently an iterative process. An initial round of sampling might confirm that there has been a release, but further sampling might be needed to determine the aerial and vertical extent of the release. That said, there are two important characterization milestones set forth in the RBCRs. The first milestone is tier characterization. A release that takes 1 year or more to remediate is assigned to a risk-based tier that determines the level of oversight applicable to the remediation process. These oversight tiers will be discussed in the next video. In order to assign a release to the appropriate oversight tier, tier characterization must be completed within the first year after the discovery or occurrence of the release. Tier characterization requires that contamination be delineated to identify the extent of each substance present at more than 50% of the applicable cleanup standard, or to the laboratory reporting limit if that is higher. A streamlined characterization approach is also available for polluted fill, which we will discuss in a further episode. The other milestone is closure characterization. A release cannot be closed under the RBCRs until closure characterization is complete. Closure characterization requires that the horizontal and vertical extent of a release be delineated to the point that such release is no longer detected, or that the extent of the release has otherwise been determined in a manner consistent with prevailing standards and guidelines. To review, characterization is the evaluation of the nature and extent of a release in accordance with prevailing standards and guidelines. The conceptual site model approach, which is used today and will continue to be used, is the development of a three-dimensional representation of environmental conditions at a release area. While characterization is inherently iterative, there are two important milestones: tier characterization and closure characterization. As a release is characterized, a remedial approach can be developed. Remediation endpoints and closure documentation will be discussed in future episodes. The next episode discusses risk-based tiers that govern how a release is managed as remediation is underway. I hope you will join us. Thank you.